Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Well, today we're going to be talking about the Democratic Party and that they will never accept a Trump victory. That's what our interview will talk about today. We're going to be having on Barry Shaw. He's going to be telling us that they already have 160 lawyers, perhaps more, ready to fight any Trump victory if indeed he does win. Some people are saying he's going to win in a landslide vote. Others are saying, you have people on both sides of the aisle saying he's going to lose. But Hillary Clinton saying that whatever Biden does, he should not concede. They have their street militia, he says, ready to respond to Trump bringing in the National Guard to, quote unquote, prove that Trump is a Nazi and that the National Guard are his stormtroopers. He's going to talk about what he sees as the psychological tactics of the Democrats that are in power, the leaders of the mobs, etc., and the organizational similarities between the Intifada and the chaos in America. Our guest says that they stem from the same root. Now, I want to emphasize here, we are not talking about all people who vote Democrat. A lot of people who vote Democrat, perhaps even the majority, are not necessarily violent people or hateful people. They just believe that we have to be liberal and we have to do this and we have to do that, and they're convinced that this is the right way to go. However, the thugs on the street, the mobs that are terrorizing people, burning down businesses, taking over the streets, this has to be stopped. This is mob rule, and you can never have justice and peace and prosperity when you have mob rule. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back.
G'day, I'm Jono Vandor.
And I'm Ross Nichols.
Join us on our program, Israel on My Mind, a show that broadcasts all the weekly goodness that flows like milk and honey from the Holy Land straight into your ears with humorous and happy news stories.
New shows are posted every Thursday at 7 p.m. Israel time, highlighting the lighter side and advancing a positive view of Israel here on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we are back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And we are talking today about the Democratic Party, most specifically its leadership and the mobs on the streets. The Antifa, the BLM, these are all people who are going to be voting Democrat, and the Democrat leadership they're working together because they're allowing these thugs to take over their streets. We've seen it with the mayors. We've seen it with their Democratic mayors, their Democratic governors not wanting federal assistance from Trump to bring peace and law and order back to their streets. We've seen them supporting these autonomous zones, which are totally illegal. And I'm thinking about Nancy Pelosi right now, I've seen the clips of her standing at the podium and talking about when the mobs were tearing down historic statues in their cities. And her reply was so glib, saying, well, if the people don't want to have these statues, then they want to take them down, and that's what the people want. But she's supposed to be a government official who is supposed to be upholding law and order. And here it's just madness. Because if somebody wants to get rid of a statue in their city, in their town square, the way to do it is to go to the city council and to make a petition, or to go up and speak and to ask it to be voted through. You can't just have a bunch of thugs that come over and decide that they don't like the statue of George Washington or Christopher Columbus or whoever it is and just to destroy it. There's laws. There are procedures that you go through because other taxpayers maybe do want it. So you have a vote. You don't have mob rule. And that's what we're seeing today, sadly, in the Democratic Party. And I know a lot of good people who are going to be voting Democratic. It's crazy. I don't think that they're thinking things through. All right. Well, our guest is going to tell us about what is happening now in the streets. And I would like to introduce him, Barry Shaw. He is the International Public Diplomacy Director at the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies. His books include Fighting Hamas, BDS and Anti-Semitism, BDS for Idiots, and 1917 From Palestine to Israel. They're all available on Amazon or at your Stamatsky bookstore here in Israel. You can visit his website, by the way, at strategic-israel.org. Welcome to the show, Barry Shaw. Barry? Okay, we're going to try to get Barry on with us. We've had some internet problems in the area. Barry, you with us? Barry?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, I heard what you had to say about the interference of big tech. This goes on against a lot of conservative voices in America. They get blocked because it goes against community standards, or they're called misinformation. Even if they're telling the truth. And this just isn't about, for instance, like the point you were making, about reporting on some abusive behavior by the Black Lives Matter in America. It goes on in other things as well that we'll be talking probably later in the show about. And it's very, very disturbing.
Yeah, actually, I didn't have a chance. I talked with you off the air about big tech, and I was telling Barry, listeners, that I have a footage of the BLM going into Rochester, New York, and basically overthrowing chairs and making diners who were sitting outside and eating, just chasing them out. And it's a very, very disturbing footage. I wanted to forward it to him. It was sent to me on WhatsApp, and WhatsApp will not let me forward this video footage. Not only will it not let me forward it, many times what I've done in order to get around it is to download the video, rename it, and then send it as like a new video, and I've been able to do that, and sadly, it won't even let me download the video now, so I have no idea how I'm able to even get this footage to other people through any type of high-tech way. All right, so Barry, with all that is happening here, you were telling me that the Democratic Party will never accept a Trump victory. Why don't we start from there?
Well, I wrote an article called The Dangers to Israel of a Biden administration. And if you let me, I'd like to give you a lot of information that your listeners may be interested in.
Okay.
President-elect candidate Joe Biden appealed to American Jewish voters with the promise not to condition U.S. aid to Israel. But in my opinion, his word, based on past history, is disingenuous. he does one thing and says one thing and does the opposite. Senator Biden in 1982, Tamar, threatened to cut off U.S. aid from Israel, which is contrary to what he's promising today. And in a really heated exchange with the Israeli Prime Minister at the time, Menachem Begin, when he told that he was begging that he was intending to cut off U.S. aid if Israel did change its policies, Begin banged on the table and said, "Don't you threaten us with cutting off your aid. I'm not a Jew with trembling knees. I'm a proud Jew with 3,700 years of civilized history. Nobody came to our aid when we were dying in the gas chambers and the ovens. Nobody came to our aid when we were striving to create our country. We paid for it. We fought for it. We died for it. And we will stand by our principles and we will defend them. And when it's necessary, we'll die for them again, with or without your aid." This is Menachem Begin, Israeli Prime Minister, to Biden. In an administration that promised no daylight between the United States, Obama, Biden, John Kerry, and Hillary Clinton did precisely the opposite. And Israel was furious at the administration for leaking intelligence of an Israeli strike on a Syrian facility storing Russian surface-to-air missile systems. In December 2005, Wall Street Journal, by the way, article detailed how Obama administration conducted surveillance on Israeli officials to discover how Israeli government would react to their terrible Iran nuclear deal. And this broke decades of bipartisan U.S. policy towards Israel. Yeah. Biden, by the way, has pledged to revive the Obama Middle East policies, particularly as critically criticized the Iran nuclear deal, which allows Iran to develop not only its advanced missile program, but even more sophisticated centrifuges buried in their underground facility at Natanz. They had an explosion there last month in August, you might recall. And the centrifuges will speed up the enrichment of the uranium that's needed to produce a nuclear warhead at a time of Iran's choosing. This is a result of the bad Obama-Biden Iran deal. And the disastrous fallout of this deal was a failure, not understanding that the Iranian regime would not use the money on its people, but on broadening its malevolent regional intentions. And the Obama-Biden generous gift of $150 billion plus an additional plane load of $1.5 billion in cash has enabled the Islamic regime in Tehran to extend its hegemony violently, directly and via proxies through Iran into Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, and further south in Yemen. That's the price you pay for people like Obama and Biden's foreign policy. In a sense, a good thing's come out of it because it's left the Sunni Arab world with a dire sense of vulnerability. And inadvertently, in my opinion, it's driven moderate Arab states to first develop covert contacts with Israel, and now with the advent of the Israel-UAE peace deal, with open relationships and normalization and partnership. And the recognition of this miraculous development rests not on Obama and Biden, but with President Donald Trump that left the Middle East because the Obama-Biden administration left the Middle East and North Africa in a bloody turmoil. Now, it's worth noting that there was an attempt to oppose an anti-boycott bill in Congress. It was defeated, but 17 Democrats continued to support BDS. A further 10 abstained from the vote, and 2 Democrat presidential hopefuls at the time absented from the vote, as did House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And although Democrats representatives attend the annual AIPAC conference to show their support of Israel, the jury is out really whether they do so to appeal to their Jewish and Christian voters rather than affirmative love of Israel. And the doubt stems from the failure of any Democratic Congress member to attend the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. Incidentally, Tamar, they also swerved the Israeli Embassy celebration party in Washington, D.C., so they couldn't even go across the road from the Congress to help Israel celebrate the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Washington, in Jerusalem. But in my opinion, the unkindest cut of all was when Obama-Biden stabbed Israel in the back as they were leaving the White House.
Okay, hold it right there, Barry, because we have to go to a break. Sorry to interrupt you. If anybody wants to call in with any comments or questions, feel free to do so on the topic that we're talking about. We're speaking with Barry Shaw, and we're going to be right back after the break.
Hi, everyone. This is Andrea Simento from Jerusalem, inviting you to drop everything and join me on my show, Pull Up a Chair. We'll visit this week's quirky stories, meet fabulous guests, and discover my Israel. Together, we'll laugh, shout, and explain the topics that make us say, hey, we've got to talk about that. So get comfortable and pull up a chair with me, Andrea Simento, every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we are back here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com and the Tamar Yonah Show, and we're speaking with our guest, Barry Shaw. And we're talking about how the Democrats, sadly, will never accept a Trump victory. Barry, you were telling me that they've already got well over 100 lawyers already ready to go in case there is a Trump win. That we know that Hillary Clinton has said that to Joe Biden that he should not concede. Whatever he does, do not concede. And I've heard rumors, and again, they're only rumors, that they are if indeed Trump has a landslide win, like some are predicting, that they're going to, in another week or two following November 3rd, they're going to have all of these ballots that were supposedly mailed in to tip the scales to the other side and make a Joe Biden win, that they are not going to go down. They are not going to, whatever it takes, they are not going to accept a win from Trump. What do you have to say about that?
Precisely there. This is exactly what they're doing. From my research and studies, I find you can tell what the Democrats are planning to do because they project it onto Trump. It doesn't matter all the way from Russian collusion. Remember Russian collusion? It was actually the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign that was working through a foreign agent in order to get dirt on Biden from who? From the Russians in the Kremlin. And it's the same also with the Ukraine incident where they tried to impeach Trump when actually it was Biden who was found guilty, if you like, of threatening the Ukraine to get a prosecutor fired, a prosecutor that was going to investigate Burisma, a corrupt energy company in which his son, Hunter Biden, was receiving huge amounts of money. So basically, the Democrats tell you what they're doing because they, even in advance now, they blame Trump for what they're planning. And one of these, as you quite rightly said, is that they intend to somehow win an election by doing things that perhaps even involve things like harvesting votes and things like this. But they're accusing Trump of wanting to steal an election, which is ridiculous. I'll give you one example. Obama, former President Obama, he created over a year ago, about 2 years ago, an organization called Organization for Action. Now, why would Obama not enjoy his retirement? The aim, he says, is community organizing, which is something he did, when he was a law professor in Chicago. You think Obama really, wants to take up a hobby? of community organizing. They've spent tens of millions of dollars. They have 250 offices nationwide in America. They have a staff of 32,000 people. Now, what are they doing that for? Just to make sure the election is more efficient? Or is it perhaps that they want to make sure that they can take the data of swing states and somehow switch the results that will produce a Democrat victory? Now, what you, quite rightly, you said that even if Trump wins, and I expect, I put it this way, if the elections in America are taking the verifiable, traditional, and honest method, Trump will win, I believe, in a landslide. But if you're taking this mail-in voting and absentee vote and everything that the Democrats are asking, so that, millions of votes will not be identified as being genuine, it's a way of stealing an election. And they've got the lawyers in case, for instance, the result doesn't go their way, and they can start making by their compliant media, CNN, MSNBC, claiming that Trump stole the elections and there he has to be sued.
Right, and so that's why I've been saying that whatever happens in November, it's not going to be good for America. And you were saying that that they're hoping that if Trump brings out the National Guard, that's going to prove to their side that Trump is a Nazi and the National Guard is his stormtroopers. What do you have to say about that?
Well, again, you've touched on another sensitive spot for me, because you're right. Just take the way that some of the leaders, not the Black Lives Matter or not the Antifa, the leaders of the Democratic Party are, for instance, talking not just about Trump, but about the police. The police. Joe Biden called them the enemy. Nancy Pelosi said they were stormtroopers. Clyburn called them Gestapo. These are the leaders. This is the establishment of the Democratic Party. And this is the way they're talking about law enforcement in America. But on the other hand, Biden, what I wanted to tell you, paid a visit the day after President Trump to Kenosha, this town where a guy got shot. Basically, a petty criminal got shot after he had sexually assaulted a woman that he'd had a restraining order against. And Biden followed Trump to Kenosha. But what did Biden do? He went to visit the father of the Jacob Blake Sr. Let me tell you a little bit about Jacob Blake Sr. He's a person that posted a number of anti-Semitic and anti-white posts on Facebook with comments referring to the Jewish-controlled media, that the Jewish victims before October 2018 Tree of Life shooting were warned about it and didn't attend. He refers to Jews as crackers, the same pink-toed Jewish people that control the interest rates, they control the minds and money. And he's also a supporter of the anti-Semite Louis Farrakhan, the leader of the Nation of Islam. And Joe Biden met with him. It was televised. I mean, isn't this terrible? Democrat Jewish voters, don't you think this is appalling? Dov Hilkin, who formed Americans Against Anti-Semite, said of him, it's just beyond comprehension. Someone who follows Farrakhan, the number one anti-Semite in the country, someone who preaches hate against the Jewish people, somebody who's a follower of Louis Farrakhan. So how in God's name does the former vice president go and meet with this individual and praise him? This is the Democratic Party. This is the leadership of the Democratic Party. And yet I suppose most Democratic voters would say, no, but Trump's worse. They always project and deflect. I would suggest Democratic Jewish voters take heed of what is happening with your party, because as 11 mayors in one particular state declared that they will be voting for Trump in the next election. And I heard, you remember, Tamar, in previous shows, I talked about Corbyn in Britain. Do you remember?
Yes.
And I always said that a lot of Jews and even non-Jew members of parliament walked away. And what expression did they use? They said, I didn't leave the party left me.
Right.
This is precisely the expression that was used by 11 Democrat mayors who are going to vote for Trump in the next election. Because, as they said, I didn't leave the party left me. This is a wake-up call to naive American Jews who traditionally vote Democrat. It's time for you to walk away.
Yeah, and you were saying also that the Intifada and the mob rule on the street today in the United States come from the same roots. Tell us about that.
I can make similarities with again, in the past I talked to you about the Arab Spring, which turned into the Islamic Winter, but just take a couple of examples. I can take the example, for instance, of even the Yasser Arafat making a peace deal with Israel, and then courting his followers that the Jews have to be dealt with, etc., and riling them up, and they took to the street, and it ended up with the Intifada, where over 1,000 Israelis were killed. The same goes in Egypt, where the Muslim Brotherhood hijacked a protest rally, human rights protest rally in Tahrir Square, and used it in order to rile up the people. First of all, to target the police. Isn't that familiar with America? And then also, they ended up gaining power. They removed Mubarak, and they put him in prison on charges. This will be the fate of Trump if the Democrats and their radicals take power after November. They'll go after Trump with their 160 lawyers. They'll indict him on all sorts of fake charges in an effort, even though he's not president, to put him in prison. Because this is going to be part of the intolerant Democrat radicals that are led by a figurehead who protests to be moderate, but really doesn't know what day it is. And the real decisions are going to be made by people like the Ilhan Omars, the Ocasio-Cortez, and the Rashida Tlaibs, and other people like that. They're the ones, and Bernie Sanders, they're the ones that will be driving the policy, not Biden. Biden will be nothing more than a puppet, a figurehead in the White House, there to be trotted out to meet visiting dignitaries for photo opportunities, sign various policy statements they put on his table, and also perhaps to make speeches of teleprompters, because he hasn't got the ability to talk about any issue without.
Okay, hold it right there. We'll be right back.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
And me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we're back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and we're trying to get a better connection with Barry just so there's a little bit less echo. In the meantime, while we're trying to get him back, I want to talk about a couple of things that people are predicting. I don't know if it's true, but I wanted to put it out there just so you can be aware of it. One is that there are rumors going around. It could be in jest, by the way, just joking around. Very well could be. But they're saying that in order to avoid debating with U.S. President Donald Trump, that Joe Biden is all of a sudden going to have to go into quarantine because he may have been exposed to the coronavirus, and therefore he has to go into quarantine for the next 2 weeks or so. and he'll be able to avoid doing a debate that way. So that's kind of funny. And then something else that was just put out, and you can go do a search on it yourself. If you just do a search on EMP for electromagnetic pulse attack, that's, remember, when it's like an atomic bomb that they set off in the sky, which doesn't do any damage to buildings and things like that. But what it does is it will totally collapse the system of internet, of power, electric power, your cars, etc. Everything's going to stop. It's basically they predict that if something like that would happen, it would bring that area back into the Stone Age, in the sense of nothing's going to work anymore. Your cars, which are not just mechanical, but they're on computer chips or computers today, our cars will not be running. Airplanes could, God forbid, fall from the sky. All of these things. Now, according to Zero Hedge and to other, I did do a search, and there are other places that are reporting this as well. According to ZeroHedge.com, they're saying here that the U.S. Department of Homeland Security released a new report warning about a potential electromagnetic pulse or EMP attack against the United States from one of America's enemies. Could be China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, or international terrorists. Now, they're warning that China has been planning to defeat the United States with an EMP and cyber Pearl Harbor attack for a quarter of a century already. So if you want to go look that up, you can do it. Just do a search for EMP and let me see. What did I? Let me just go there and see. Just do a search for EMP attack on your search, and then hit news, and you'll see Security Magazine is reporting. Is reporting this. This is from 3 days ago. The Sun 7 hours ago reported on the story. HS Today 2 days ago reported on the story. And if you go down the list, Executive Gov reported on the story. I'm familiar with all of these websites, but there's a few. So you might want to check it out, that they're predicting that something like this, God forbid, could happen to disrupt the elections, to put America in chaos, and just to make a terrible, terrible situation for the people in the United States of America. All right, let me just check what's going on with, do we have Barry on? Barry?
Hear me?
Okay, we have you on. Great, wonderful. All right, Barry, you wanted to talk about the coronavirus in Israel. We're all talking about there may be another lockdown here the Jewish holidays, the high holiday season. What do you have to say about what's happening here in Corona?
Well, I've got a lot to talk about, but in the limited amount of time, I just want to raise one issue. At the peak of the first wave of the virus in Israel, the death toll of infected people was just over 300. Guess what it is today in the second peak? It's over 1,000. Right? And the experts, our health officials, what are they talking about? Stopping the spread, turning the country into a four-color traffic light. Those are go into total lockdown. But they're not talking about how you stop early infected patients from being hospitalized. They know that once you get in a hospital and your situation deteriorates, your health deteriorates, really, there's only a one-way ticket, and that's out. I made a video movie, and your viewers listeners can watch it if they search for COVID, the drug that dare not speak its name, or contact me at theviewfromisrael@gmail.com, and I'll send you the link. I interviewed, very quickly, a Dutch doctor, and he followed the official recommendations of how to treat early patients: isolation and paracetamol. You know what happened with his first 25 patients who got sick with COVID? All of them went to hospital and 12 died. And he decided to go and look into the science. And he decided to use the forbidden drug in combination with other medications. And as a result of that, he had another 10 COVID patients, and all of them got well within 3 days. My feeling is, and I'm trying to do an investigation here, and I'm asking the question, Why is it that in the first wave we only had 300 deaths and we now have already over 1,000? What are they doing now that they didn't do before? Or what are they not doing now that they did before? And the one factor I can find is that they banned here in Israel the application of hydroxychloroquine used with zinc and other medications as recommended, for instance, in the Zelensky protocol. And I've discussed this with Professor Harvey Risch, who maybe you should interview on your show as well, who is fuming about what is going on in America. And you talked about a ban on social media. There were a group of doctors from clinics in America who had been successfully treating patients with this combination of drugs, and they went to Congress to demand a meeting with health officials so that they can have a discussion and change it. You know what? And there was a video. They had a press conference and a video was made. Do you know what you said before about it being taken off? It was taken off Facebook and everything. Suddenly, Mark Zuckerberg is more of a specialist in medicine than even people like Dr. Simone Gold or Dr. Silenko or Professor Harvey Risch. There is something strange going on here. I haven't got enough time to talk about it because I think we're about to run in time, but I've got a lot more to say about what is happening in Israel, and it should be alarm a lot of your listeners, because something is happening and nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, I just want to say here, Barry, that the World Health Organization goes and they give out the rulings, basically. They tell all the health ministers from all the member states of the UN, which is the entire world, basically, that you go home to your countries and make sure that this vaccine is given or that this treatment is given, and you have to implement this in your country. And that's what, if Israel took it off, it's because it was instructed by the World Health Organization. Go ahead.
But I want to answer that because, okay, some people say, you can't use this hydroxychloroquine because it failed in clinical trials on late-stage patients. I ask you to go to Professor Harvey Risch and you'll find out how they applied this hydroxychloroquine. First of all, in dangerous doses against against patients, that were seriously ill. And they didn't combine it with the other necessary drugs that should have had it. In any case, hydroxychloroquine is not being recommended for late stage. It's recommended for early stage. And as for the World Health Organization, they recommended paracetamol, which has never passed any late stage clinical trials for COVID, and also has dangerous side effects. And this paracetamol that the officials in Holland recommended by virtue of the World Health Organization put 25 of this Dutch doctors' patients in hospital, and 12 of them died.
Right. Yeah, it's a shanda, as we say. And we know that even President Trump stopped wanting to fund the World Health Organization and their handling of the COVID virus in the first place when it first came out. So absolutely. Barry, in the last 2 minutes that we have, go for it. What do you want to leave us with?
Thank you for this, because quite frankly, what I want to do is I want to invite any doctors, any clinics, any health officials, any patients who have personal or professional experience of being infected by COVID to contact me, especially if they had or didn't have the Zelenko protocol mix of hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and azithromycin, and basically contact me by, again, my email address, theviewfromisrael@gmail.com, because I want to do another video specifically on the situation here in Israel. I want to be asking officials why the heck they aren't stopping more early stage patients from becoming seriously ill.
Yeah, and I hope that you're able to do that. And again, if anybody didn't get the email address, you can also always write us info at israelnewstalkradio.com, and we'll forward anything to Barry. And that goes for anything about the station. If you have any comments, feedback about another show, about anything about the station, you can always write us at info at israelnewstalkradio.com. Tell us who to forward the letter to, and we will be happy to do that for you. All right, Barry, so we've talked about COVID. We've talked about the Democratic Party. The future in the next 100 days does not look too good, whether whether it's about Corona or whether it's about the U.S. elections. And we're just going to have to pray and do what we can do. And the rest we have to pray about that things will turn out as best as possible.
Well, there's some good news on the horizon with regard to our peace deals with the United Arab Emirates, and things are opening up there. And Bahrain have said they're waiting to declare normalization with Israel after the White House signing of the deal between UAE and Israel. Incidentally, I can now tell you that Israel has been allowed to have direct flights between Tel Aviv and Dubai.
That's
starting
right.
in October.
Very sorry, we got to go. The music's on. We got to go. Thank you very much, and thank you for ending us on a high note. We want to be optimistic. Thank you, everybody, for being with us.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
If you're hearing this message, everyone else can too. Advertise with Israel News Talk Radio and get your message out to people. We'll build a personalized package for you. Contact advertising at israelnewstalkradio.com.
Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey, this is Jake in Anchorage, Alaska, and I love listening to all the super interesting interviews and up-to-date information on what's happening in Israel.
Hello, this is Anna King, originally from London, now living in Israel. And what can I say? Israel News Talk Radio is my cup of tea.
My name is Bhaskar. I'm from India, and I love listening because you get to know the truth and wonderful voices from this lovely country.
Mom! Okay, wait a minute. Hi, this is Chava Dax, and I'm calling from the rolling hills of Ma'ale Adumim, just north of Jerusalem. I always listen to Israel News Talk Radio to get all the latest news and commentary and to keep me up to date every day.
This is Sarah Dax from Ma'ale Adumim, and I'm 12. I wish Israel News Talk Radio was boring so my mom wouldn't listen to it all the time. Mom!
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.